The generation that I am in, along with most other college students, is Generation Z. Generation Z is differentiated from the other generations because they weren't old enough when 9/11 happened to remember what happened. Now, obviously, that's a huge deal because most other generations feel that 9/11 was one of the most important periods in their lives, and obviously has had a huge impact on American history over the last 2 decades. In this speech, I'll be analyzing George Bush's speech at Ground Zero 3 days following 9/11. The supercharged emotions of that time right after 9/11 perfectly played into George Bush's hands, and in his speech, he demonstrated his connection to the pathos and the emotion of the people there and Americans all over the country. In this speech, I will talk about the historical context of the speech, the actual content of the words that President George Bush said, and then finally how he used his non-tangibles to play to the emotions of everyone was there during the time that he gave the speech and that was watching live on TV. His speech is readily available on YouTube as it was filmed by thousands of news companies that were there and on personal cameras as well. So it's pretty easy to see the speech. It's widely regarded as one of uh, his best speeches that he gave, and you'll see why throughout the speech. So, first is talking about the historical context. Most of us know what 9/11 is, as we've learned about it almost every year in all of the schooling that we've had, and then there's lots of resources online that you can use to learn about this, but I'm going to focus on what George Bush did in the days after 9/11 and then leading up to this speech that he gave. When the event happened, he was in Florida at an elementary school. I think lots of people have seen that video of him getting told the news. And he was stayed in Florida and was moved around to protect himself for the rest of the day. And then eventually he made the decision that he wanted to go to New York City. His advisors were going to let him eventually, but he really pushed that through to try and get there immediately. And yeah, he forced his way onto Ground Zero, which is where all the first responders were organizing and where the actual buildings stood. And one important thing to note is that his approval rating was relatively stable before this event, but following uh, following the speech, about 10 days after giving the speech, he holds the record for the highest approval rating ever. Now, that's not to say that this is directly a response of this speech alone, but it's a combination of all the actions that he took, including the speech, which played a big role. So that's just some beginning evidence of how supercharged the emotions were and how well he deflected that into something positive for both himself and for Americans. Obviously, that approval rating wouldn't hold for the rest of his presidency, but that's even more evidence of how well he handled himself in the speech. So the speech itself, like I said, it was held at Ground Zero. He had been talking to first responders the whole day, just trying to scope everything out. I guess typically politician things, but a couple of interesting things to note were that he was in plain clothes, and uh, as you can imagine, most presidents that we see in public events are wearing their suit and tie, but in this case, he was just plain clothes, trying to relate to people as much as possible. At least that's the interpretation that I get from analyzing the speech. But the main content of his speech and the actual words that he said that America is on bended knee to support, to mourn the dead. So obviously, giving that sentiment that the world is grieving about what happened in this tragic event. Then next, thankfulness to the first responders. He expressed how Americans felt, all these first responders, firefighters, EMTs, everyone that was responding and helping out with this huge disaster. And then following those two messages, he said that soon the people who knocked down these buildings will hear the cries of the people that were there. So that's kind of alluding to what he would do politically, whether you agree with it or not. But that's just alluding to how he would channel some of this energy into uh, war with Iran and Iraq and intervention in the Middle East. And then finally, he kept a constant message of God bless America. This isn't something that I personally agree with, but it's something that appealed to a lot of people at the time. I think times have changed a little bit over the past couple decades, but still super powerful, and the people there gave a good reaction to that. So that transitions to what I find most interesting about this speech. The speech was only about 2 minutes and 30 seconds long, but it really appealed to a lot of people's emotions. You can see in here in the reactions of the people there. I think the main things, like I said, are his casualness, and it seems like he really speaks from the heart because he doesn't have a sheet, and it seems like he's just going impromptu, didn't have this speech planned at all. But the audience there were all first responders. He's in plain clothes. He has a megaphone up to his mouth, and then he puts his arm around one of the firefighters there while he's giving the whole speech. So that really gave a message of unity and just appealed to everyone who was there because it's like he had their arm around them and around all of America. That's like the symbolism I got. And then he was like a comedian almost, playing with the crowd. They would shout things like USA, USA, and he would channel that. Or at one time, someone said, I can't hear you, and he responded, I can hear you though, and then he channeled that into talking about Americans can hear the people there and the people that tragically died in the event. So overall, he really appealed to emotions, and like I said with the ratings, that really boosted his ratings and how Americans viewed him through that speech that was televised all over the country. So, in overall, analyzing the historical context, the content of the speech, and then what he did to help appeal to emotions, I think this was a super powerful speech, as showed by the support for his second term of presidency, the approval ratings, how people supported him in his political movements after this. It was a really powerful speech, and it's a speech that people still refer to as one of the greatest speeches by a president. And overall, uh, this was considered one of the greatest speeches, especially because he wasn't behind a podium, and that's what I believe makes this speech so great to analyze. Thank you.